Welcome to Raised on D&D podcast. Each month, Raised on D&D brings you inspirational interviews with tips and strategies to enrich your family's gaming experience. Your host for Raised on D&D has been a game master for 30 years and father to 3 gamers. Here is Nick Cardarelli.
My next guest is from Indianapolis, Indiana. She works in social media marketing for streams such as Unicorn Meeple and Stupid Puppy Games. But you know her best as one of the 4 lovely and funny hosts of Dames and Games. Please welcome Jade Duguay. Hi, Jade.
Hi there.
Jade, thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And I know that you are a board game enthusiast, and we normally talk about role-playing games on Raised on D&D. We're going to talk a little bit about role-playing games and board games today, though, as changing it up a little bit. So, Jade, can you share with our listeners a little bit about your gaming history, how you started playing tabletop?
Okay. So I didn't have a lot of gaming when I was young. Wasn't my family's thing, unfortunately. Strangely enough, though, my mom worked for a game preserve, and she would bring home Dungeons and Dragons books and Magic the Gathering cards because she liked the artwork. And my mom was a really big artist at the time, really enjoyed painting and things like that. So she was drawing inspiration from these things. So they were always around, but I never really got involved with the gaming aspect. I just recognized the artwork. As I got older, I collected Magic cards with friends, but again, never picked up the game. It wasn't until I was out on my own as an adult that my very first tabletop experience was Settlers of Catan.
We love Settlers of Catan. I'm sure everybody does. And we actually got the Settlers of Catan for kids for our family. But that was years and years ago. So you sat down for the first time with Settlers of Catan, and what happened next?
I can't say that I was in love with it. I do enjoy it, but my boyfriend at the time was really good at strategy, and I just never won. And every time I would think I was going to win, I didn't get there. So, that loses its luster after a while. Like, you want to know that you can win. So
right.
Gaming kind of took a backseat for a while. And then my daughter's dad was very into Magic the Gathering. And then I started going to competitions with him and watching that played and tried my hand at it. Competition circuit isn't really my thing. People are a little too aggressive for me. At least Magic players and some of the ones that I played with, some had no problems with like walking me through things and making sure, since they knew, I was new. And you get those hardcore Magic players, and that's
they can get a little intense.
Yeah. So we played a lot of basic board games at home together too, Monopoly, Risk, things like that. They didn't really get heavy into tabletop until after he and I split up. Me and my best friend started playing a lot of games together because we were kind of going through the same thing. And that was how we got through our split ups, and that's when I really kind of found my love for tabletop, is playing games with him. It's funny because I didn't realize this at the time. There's a Warhammer board game,
mm-hmm.
and it's actually designed by 2 guys that live nearby me.
Wow.
Brothers, yeah, and they're wonderful, and they've got some really big like minis games out now. I'm not a minis person, but like that was my real like first experience with like a campaign style game, and that was so much fun to me, like building up these characters. And I've always kind of had an interest in RPG, but it wasn't until 2017 I was at Gen Con 50, and it was my first Gen Con. So it was very overwhelming being at Gen Con 50, which sold out and it was packed. And I was
wow. And I think Gen Con 50, if I'm not mistaken, cleared somewhere like 65,000 attendees. So I can only imagine how amazing it was.
It was pretty neat, but it was very overwhelming for someone that was literally my first real convention experience with gaming.
Wow.
And I kind of jumped in the deep
Yes.
at this convention, and I ran into them at Gen Con. They had this little corner with a bunch of seats and their mic set up. And, I was like, hey, I know them and I'm really overwhelmed. I'm just going to go sit with them.
Mm-hmm.
And they, at conventions, were interviewing people. So they threw me on a mic. They were like, join us on this interview. And I was like, okay, guest interview spot. Great. I was, again, overwhelmed by that because I had no idea what I was doing. And a few weeks later, they reached out to me and they were like, hey, we also do RPGs for our podcast. And we want to know if you'd like to join us. We really enjoyed, interviewing with you. And I think they thought, I would be a good addition. So that was my first real experience with RPG.
So they wanted you to do to be on their podcast show where they actually play role-playing games and then broadcast them. Is that right?
Yes.
And what role-playing game were they using for that for their show?
The two that I was involved in, we did an older Marvel one. I think it was like from the 80s.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't tell you what it was called. And then we did the Star Trek Adventures.
Okay. And I never got to play the 1980s Marvel one, though many people I talk to say it's one of the best superhero role-playing games there is. But Star Trek Adventures we're very familiar with. Me and my family love Star Trek Adventures.
One of my co-hosts on that podcast is one of the writers for that. So that was really neat.
Wow, no way. So they had real working experience with the new system.
Yeah, he did at least.
and so Jade, are you a Trekker?
I grew up watching it. I am familiar with it, but I realized doing that RPG with them, how minimal my knowledge really was. I was like, oh yeah, I love Star Trek. I used to watch it with my dad all the time. And then they're like naming planets and things like that. And I'm like, oh, well, okay. So I do love some Star Trek. I just realized that I was not as much of a Trekkie as I thought I was once I started playing this with them.
I always love playing with a mixed group of players when you're playing any kind of franchise game. I like people who are really big into the franchise, and I like playing with people who have, maybe no knowledge of the franchise at all, because they're really surprised at ordinary things, and the expert is there to correct me. Well, actually, we can't go left on the Enterprise in this corridor because it leads to this. And I'm like, oh, it does. Okay.
Yes, that's almost exactly like they were talking about, no, we're over in this quadrant of like, oh, you like have working knowledge of the whole like galaxy, or like, okay, like it goes on and on.
That's awesome. So how long was that campaign? How many sessions was that for you?
A year.
Okay.
I don't know that we finished the campaign. We kind of had some personal issues and kind of fell apart and never finished either of our campaigns.
Okay.
Which is unfortunate, but it was a lot of fun, and it's definitely something like I don't have any experience with like Dungeons and Dragons, but that was, they were fun things to kind of draw me into role-playing games.
Mm-hmm. And for RPGers, by the way, that's common. That happens to home tables as well as professional shows online, things like that. That it just people move, they get different jobs, schedule changes. It's always something. So that's something we're real familiar with. You jumped right in. Your first experience with tabletop role-playing games, or going right online, playing in campaigns over the internet. How about at home? Have you and Audrey, your daughter, like to play board games together? Have you guys tried any RPGs yet together?
Haven't tried any yet. I actually was at PAX East just before this whole pandemic, and we were next to ninth level games, and they had this adorable little paperback book for this RPG it's called The Excellence, and it is a role-playing game where you're playing a princess, and all the princesses are they're all in a band together, so they're rock and roll princesses, and I'm really excited to try that out. She's got a bunch of little girls in the neighborhood she's friends with, and it was kind of my oh, this is how I'm going to introduce this whole future gamers to these little girls, and maybe start out GMing for them, and then kind of letting one of them take over if they wanted. So we haven't done it together yet.
Well, with everybody locked down, I'm sure it's difficult, but that is going to be awesome. I mean, ninth level games are amazing. I love their Kobolds Ate My Baby from years ago. That was such a funny game, and we used to love it. And that was one that we didn't really play with the kids as much as we played with the grown-ups. But I was taking a look at, it's called The Excellence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got a real gem in the holograms feel, so I kind of like that about it, and also a little Steven Universe in there as well. So I think it might be a lot of fun for little girls and anybody else who might want to try it.
Yeah, I'm excited. It really just caught my attention because it really kind of screamed Audrey to me, because she's both this princess, but she's also a little bit rock and roll, a little bit tomboy. So it all kind of she's just this weird mix of everything. So I'm excited. It really grabbed my attention, as far as just the cover alone. And I can't think of her name, but one of the two creators of it, I actually have coming. I backed her first solo Kickstarter. It's an RPG called Monster Mixtape, I think. And you're creating playlists in this RPG. So
that sounds really cool.
It's one I invested in for myself for some fun.
But you guys play a lot of tabletop board games. What are some of the tabletop board games you like to play with Audrey?
She is a big fan of, there's a card game called Sparkle Kitty. And it's a card game of casting magic spells. And what I really enjoy about it is you are a princess locked in a tower, and you're casting spells to save yourself.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, so she's a big fan of that one. She's actually she plays it so much, she now teaches she's even taught a group of adults how to play it.
Now, how intense is it? Are we talking Magic the Gathering level card game of competitiveness?
No, it is almost, think Uno, but more fun.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, it almost looks so there's a little spell book in the center, and the cards almost look like Uno cards. They're colorful, and they have symbols and a word. And you've got two stacks, and you can change a spell word by either using the same color card or a same symbol. And you have to say that spell. And every time you empty your hand, you get to pull a card off of your tower and start a fresh hand until you've emptied all 4 cards off of your tower.
Okay. That sounds really cool.
So yeah, it's a fun little, simple filler game. She had a sleepover and we taught the girls. 2 of them liked it. One of them just wasn't interested in games. So I know she's got at least 2 out here that are down to play some board games with her when we can.
Very cool. Very cool.
We're also big fans of Kodama, the Tree Spirits, and Potion Explosion.
Okay. And for our listeners who aren't familiar, what is the Tree Spirit board game about?
It is this adorable, it's a card game, and you have a Kodama. It's a little tree spirit, and each one of you has different Kodamas that you're trying to appease them, and you're growing a tree. And you gain points by connecting branches with similar objects on them and things like that. What I like the most about that game is it has a variable where you have Sprout Kodama. So it simplifies it a little bit for new players or young players. So it brings you together where you're kind of playing each on your own level, but it doesn't feel like there's any sort of speed bump in it. So they just have easier objectives while they're playing. So she can play with a Sprout while the grown-ups play with the regular tree spirits, or, if she wants to play with her friends, there's enough Sprouts to play around with just Sprouts in it.
And does it have gorgeous anime-like artwork to it?
Oh my gosh, it is the cutest. And that's actually what attracted me to that game first, was I saw the artwork, and those little Kodamas are so cute. I actually picked up Kodama. They actually have a 3D version of it now.
Wow.
I picked that up at PAX. We haven't cracked that one open yet, but I'm really looking forward to that one.
Now, the 3D version, has that got like miniatures in it and everything?
There are little Kodama meeples.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's cardboard pieces where you, instead of building your tree on the table with cards, you actually have tree branches that lock in. So you're building an actual 3-dimensional cardboard tree.
Wow, that is neat. I wanted to ask you too, have you ever tried Mice and Mystics or the new Dungeons and Dragons board games?
I have not. I've seen it, and it's definitely one I want to play, but I haven't had a chance to yet.
It's very adorable. It's got that red wall vibe to it. The children really enjoyed it. We watched the show Tabletop with Will Wheaton, and that's how we got turned on to that board game. And it's got elements of RPGs in it as well. So it's kind of a nice in between RPGs and tabletop. And what was the other game you were telling us about?
Our other one is Potion Explosion.
Potion Explosion. Tell us about that one.
So you have little potion bottles in front of you, and they have little spots for different colored marbles. And you have this thing that drops out marbles, and you're basically creating potions with those marbles. But you want to be able to pull, if you pull a marble out and 2 of the same color hit, you can take those. And so there's all kinds of different ways to pull additional marbles. And as you complete those potions, that potion now gives you a one-time effect. I think there's 5 or 6 different potions in there. So one of them will let you repeat a draw, or they'll let it there's a couple of different one-time effects you can use, and you can save it or you can use it immediately. But I think we really like the tactile feel of the marbles, rolling down this tray, and
that makes it very dynamic. Keeps the excitement with all the sounds and the motion, things like that. Yeah. That's great. You didn't really grow up with games in the house as far as, them being more than artwork. What kind of skills or lessons are you hoping that Audrey will take away from the tabletop and take into adulthood with her?
I think the biggest thing I want her to take away is kind of learning to take a loss, and being humble in it, and really just more so looking at having a good time in whatever you're doing. I want her to have a healthy competitive nature, and learn how to strategize and things like that. But I think the biggest thing is just kind of taking away, like, it's okay to lose the game as long as you had fun doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's huge. My middle one, especially, he's very competitive, and he's improved thanks to tabletop games, with the whole taking the lose and taking it graciously. But the problem that we have is he's still just this weekend. He got up from the table. We were playing a Star Wars RPG, and he had kind of got it in his mind that he was going to, make the kill shot, and he was going to drop the big baddie, and he didn't. And then other people were helping, but he didn't see it as helping. He saw it as like kill stealing, like he was playing a video game.
Yeah.
And he got up from the table. He got upset, and he got up from the table. And we've gone from getting up from the table and just being done to getting up from the table on a rare occasion and saying to him, "Hey man, take a breather, count to 10, go yell in your pillow, and get back by the time it's your turn." And we've seen that improvement, and that improvement's only come from getting those disappointments at the game table.
Right. And I think the other big thing is learning to follow instructions.
Yes.
That is a struggle right now. She's in the 3rd grade, and she will try to barrel through her homework and not read the instructions and then get frustrated. So I think board games and even RPGs are a really good way to help them have fun in learning how important it is to follow the instructions.
Mm-hmm. Audrey has her own show, right? Unicorn Meeple is her show. Is that right?
Yes.
And what is her show mostly about?
Her show is going to mostly be about unboxing games and like the components. We want to kind of dive into at some point her giving just kind of a hot take on how easy it was for her to learn. Kind of, these are games that I would recommend for your family as intro games for kids. Just kind of inviting more kids to play games and building that new generation of gamers.
I think that's fantastic. And I think also that when they see a recommendation from a child that says, "Hey, I played this, I enjoyed it, and it was easy for me to learn," they're more apt to say, "Hey, I'd like to try that." And I know from my own experience with mine, when they watch things on YouTube and online, they'll come to me and they'll say, "I heard about this great game and we want to try it." And that's a lot of ways that our game collection has grown.
Yeah.
Now, your own show, Dames and Games, that's coming back for another season. Can you tell us a little bit about Dames and Games, what the show's about, and what you guys are going to be doing moving forward?
So the main basis of it is just kind of the 4 of us chatting about games, gaming industry, hot topics in gaming. The 3 other girls that I record with are Trisha Sidney. She works for Indie Boards and Cards. Then we've got Cassandra Whitaver, Jillian Schmidt, and we've kind of all got different roles within the industry. So just kind of a roundtable kind of situation, but we're also exploring the idea of adding in streaming, us playing an RPG of some sort. We're still kind of kicking around the idea because we're in 4 different states. So, I don't have a lot of people around me that I can game with. All of my gaming friends are spread out across the country, and an RPG is a really great way to game with each other without having to all have a certain board game in front of us or be in the same place.
Absolutely. And, I've been a big fan of Roll20 for years, and I've ran games on there. Last week, because of the lockdown, I actually ran a game for my brother in Seattle, cousin in Massachusetts, and one of our gaming buddies in Pennsylvania. But I've run RPGs for One table had a member in New Zealand, one in France, one in Germany, one in Wisconsin, one in South Carolina, and me here in Florida.
Oh, wow.
So doing that online it's different than sitting around the table, obviously. But at the same time, I've been able to game with people that I never would have been able to game with any other way, except maybe going to an international convention like Gen Con. So
Right.
that's great that you guys are thinking about doing that. Yeah, it's definitely going to take some logistics to work out the schedule to do it. But the tabletop role playing, that's definitely the way to go. You can have a virtual tabletop and online dice rollers, things like that. I would imagine if you guys wanted to try and do a board game, you'd all have to have like a copy of the board game. But a lot of our listeners don't realize we're not talking about, $5 Monopoly here. We're talking about $60, $80 games that are the fresh new board games, right?
Right. Yeah. It would just be so difficult to orchestrate that.
Mm-hmm.
We found that some roll-in rights work okay because you just have to have the dice and the pads of paper, so we can compete with that if we both, or any number of us own it. Like Cassandra and I have played Second Chance together. I don't know if you've ever played that, but
no, I'm not familiar with that one. What's Second Chance?
Second Chance is by Stronghold Games. It is basically Tetris on cards. So you have this little pad of paper that's a grid, and you get one starting shape, and everybody draws that. And you can play it solo also. You start with that shape. You can draw it at any direction you want. There's a dot in the center of the grid. That box has to be in your starting shape. And then after that, you play 2 cards, and you pick one of those 2 cards, you draw it connecting to your first shape, and so on, until you run out of space. Now, where the Second Chance comes in, if you can't draw one of the 2 cards on the board, there you get one extra shape just for you. If you can draw that shape, you can keep going. If you can't, you're out. And it scores based on how many squares you have filled in.
Oh, okay. So you aren't trying to run out of stuff as much as you are trying to fill up the board, and get the most pieces down.
Yeah. So over video, you can play those 2 cards in front of the camera, and everybody draw it if you have the pad of paper in front of you. But like I said, you can solo it. And one of my favorite things about this game, I work in a nursing home. And right now they're dealing with this lockdown. It's been really hard on a lot of them because they're pretty much confined to their rooms to avoid, thankfully we haven't had any cases of this virus in our nursing home, but
thank goodness.
We've kept it really, they locked down quickly and just have kind of progressively gotten stricter on their rules right now. So I kind of took it upon myself to try to work out getting solo games, and Second Chance has been my favorite one to bring into them because it's so easy, and it's coloring at the same time as it's got a small footprint. And I actually have 6 titles total. I've received 60 games from people in the board game community, which is huge. And that's what I love about gamers.
That is phenomenal. And so it's been helping the seniors stay busy, exercise their minds, and Second Chance. It's colorful and it's almost has a puzzle element to it as well, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great. And that's right along with activities that they're used to. And that's terrific. And then the board game community, they got behind you and they donated games so that the seniors would have variety to choose from.
It is never too late to convert somebody into a gamer.
Absolutely. It's for all ages.
I have a woman who's 101, and she's one of my next people I'm teaching a game, and she's so excited.
That is wonderful. Well, Jade, let me ask you this. What is your advice for parents who are trying to get their children into putting the electronics down and sitting down at the table and spending that quality family time at the tabletop. What advice would you give to those parents to help them introduce that into their homes?
Definitely make it fun. I think some adults take gaming too seriously, but also pay attention to the themes that they enjoy. Audrey very much she likes princesses, but she also I'm introducing her to Star Wars, so she likes space. She likes tomboy things, and so I look for the themes that I know that will grab her attention. So magic and fantasy are definitely things that I look for. If they're interested in some other type of theme, especially video games, look at their video games. Are they puzzle type games? Are they combat games? Find things that kind of match the style of things that they're already interested in. Because if they're not interested in the theme or the type of gameplay, they're not going to stay. Gaming isn't going to grab their interest at all. Kids are fickle, so you have to get them quick.
Absolutely. And I agree with the video game aspect. My youngest loves Fortnite, which is a online shoot 'em up game sensation. But his brother loves Monopoly, and they saw a Fortnite themed Monopoly in the store, and I was so surprised because the youngest didn't have the patience to sit down and play board games. But as soon as it was a theme that he was excited about, not only did he want us to get it, but as soon as we got it, he wanted to play it. And of course, with games that introduce those kind of franchises or themes, they put a little bit of something from the franchise into it. And he really, really enjoyed it. He unplugged. He wasn't playing the video games, and he was sitting down at the table playing a board game with us because he was interested in it.
And I think another really good way to avoid investing too much money, but maybe have an outing with your family, is to see if you have a board game cafe near you. Because then you pay a flat rate, you can go for a while and browse their library and explore things, and you don't feel bad if it's not hitting. Let's pack it up, grab another game. Honestly, I think that's a really good way to figure out what style of game interests your kids or your family, would be to utilize if you have a board game. Board game cafes are a really great way to kind of open up and without investing a whole lot of money. And it feels like an outing with your family. You're not at home. You're maybe tricking them into having fun while you're out. And well, now we know you like this game, but not that game. Or so it's kind of a 2-for-1. You get to get out of the house. You get to explore some games and figure out where your kids or your family sits on certain types of games.
Absolutely. Now, we're very fortunate here in Central Florida. It's really a tavern. It's called Cloak and Blasters, and it is on the bottom level. It is a gamer cafe, but it's also a bar and a restaurant. And then on the top level, they have a sci-fi theme, and it's video games and couches and console games, things like that. But what's nice is, as long as you're eating, as long as you're drinking, you can take the board games out of the board game library, and they have brand new games. Kings of Tokyo was one of the ones we played. Smash Up was just a kind of a card game. We played that. And we got to try those things, and we got to say, hey, this is neat. This is, is this something we could play together as a family, couple of times a month or every couple of months. And so it allowed us to do that. The other thing was, there are some game stores that do that. Now, we have on the west coast of Florida, we have a Cool Stuff Inc. Store, and they have a huge gaming area, mostly for your Magic tournaments, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, things like that. But on top of that, they also have a board game section where you can get these brand new board games right off the shelf and try them out. We've played things like the Dark Crystal board game there. We tried some Star Wars Legion, things like that. So we were able to try those out. Board game cafes, your local gaming stores, all of those are great options.
Yeah.
Well, Jade, thank you so much for being on the show today. Thank you for sharing your love for board games with us. We can't wait to hear about Dames and Games and what RPG you guys settle on and how that helps the show. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.